says that Donald Trump will sign an executive order Friday to rename the Department of Defense as the Department of War, according to Fox News. Let's see.
So, Pete, you started up by saying the Department of Defense, and somehow it didn't sound good to me. You know, it didn't sound good. Defense. What are we defense? Why are we defense? So it used to be called the Department of War, and it had a stronger sound. And as you know, we won World War I, we won World War II, we won everything. Now we have a Department of Defense. We're defenders. I don't know. If you people want to, standing behind me, if you take a little vote, if you want to change it back to what it was when we used to win wars all the time, that's okay with me. All right?
That's coming
soon. You let me know if you want to do it. I think Department of War. It just sounded bad. He said, sir, on behalf of the Department of Defense. Defense.
Department of War.
I don't want to be defense only. We want defense, but we want offense too, if that's okay. So you'll make a decision. But, you know.
Interesting. And then the Secretary of Defense posted on X about an hour ago saying Department of War. Interesting. Trump to rename Pentagon, restoring historic Department of War and latest military move. Well, I guess it is. It's looking like it's actually going to happen. They're going to change it back to the Department of War.
I started my sentence by saying the Department of Defense, to which you said that just doesn't sound right. So maybe next time we're here, my card will read Department of War. We'll see. But it's not. Here's the thing. Here's what people miss. It's not just about words. It's about the warrior ethos. It's about what the department is supposed to do. George Washington started the Department of War because he wanted us to win our wars. Our founders didn't want endless foreign entanglements. They didn't want endless contingencies and deployments. They wanted an empowered military that was, the handcuffs were taken off to fight to win.
Interesting. To rebrand.
The president's call, but I'll say this. You know, we won World War I and we won World War II, not with the Department of Defense, but with a War Department, with the Department of War. As the president has said, we're not just defense, we're offense. We're reestablishing at the department the warrior ethos. We want warriors, folks that understand how to exact lethality on the enemy. We don't want endless contingencies and just playing defense.
Definitely, Fed.
Words and names and titles matter. So we're working with the White House and the president on it.
It's been a tiring week in D.C., you say, even as a nonpartisan employee?
Eventually.
Look forward to it.
Well, even here in the briefing room.
And we'll see if you have to go to Kinko's to change your business cards. That's going to be something that's going to make a decision from the White House, I'm sure.
Interesting. Yeah. Curious. I mean, I'm assuming they're probably going to follow through with it. Department of War. Yeah. 1 hour ago. I guess it's a thing. I mean, the Secretary of Defense literally tweeted Department of War. But tomorrow's Friday, so I guess they're going to sign an executive order to rename the Department of Defense to the Department of War. That's new. That's news to me. I didn't know that. Didn't realize that was coming. Somebody posted a Warhammer meme. Nice.
I was against the Department of War. I think I'm actually for the Department of War. For the first 158 years of our republic, that's what it was. It was the...
Oh, yeah. You know what? Oh, wait. He said something about it here. Thank you for traveling with the War Department. Interesting. Huh. Well, it's going to be an interesting week for sure, especially if they rename it. Let me see. It was called the Department of War from 1789 to 1949. This is just a restoration of the original name. Yeah, I'm not sure why they renamed it to the Department of Defense anyway, from the Department of War. Let's see. So President Donald Trump is expected to sign an executive order on Friday that will change the name of the Department of Defense to the Department of War, according to a White House official. It's a move that the President and Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth have previewed in recent days, including Trump in the Oval Office last week when he told reporters his administration was going to, quote, change the name. Call it Department of Defense, but I think we're going to change the name. While at Fort Benning on Thursday, the Secretary of Defense indicated the name change would be coming on Friday. I would say stand by tomorrow when asked about a potential change. It's something that words matter, titles matter, cultures matter, and George Washington founded the War Department. We'll see. The last time the department's name was changed took an act of Congress. Yeah. I suppose renaming the Department of Defense to the Department of War tracks if you do it right after blowing up a boat flying under another nation's flag because you've tried and convicted the people on it of drug trafficking. Yeah. Well, let's see. I'm kind of curious. Why did they change the name Department of War to Department of Defense. Let's see. They changed the name from the Department of War to the Department of Defense after World War II under the National Security Act of 1947 to create a unified military structure and reflect a broader scope of national security beyond just warfare, with the renaming becoming official in 1949 when the national military establishment became the Department of Defense. The original name was the War Department, established in 1789, which oversaw all U.S. military affairs. The National Security Act of 1947 marked a significant shift by creating the national military establishment to unify the Army, Navy, and Air Force. Yeah, and interestingly enough, I think the Air Force was the Army Air Corps at first. There was no Air Force until after World War II, I want to say. It was like the Army Air Corps until then, and then they changed it over to the Air Force. The NME was renamed the Department of Defense in 1949, reflecting its expanded mission to encompass not only combat, but also the broader national security apparatus of the post-war era. The change was driven by a need to integrate and coordinate the different branches of the military under a single national security umbrella. See broader mission. The name Department of Defense was more appropriate for this unified structure, reflecting a broader mission that went beyond the traditional concept of war to include defense policy and strategy on a national scale. Interesting. Let's see. The history of the Department of Defense. The Continental Congress authorizes the creation of the Continental Army and the next day puts it under the command of George Washington. After the Revolution, it would be known as the U.S. Army. October 13th of 1775, the Continental Congress votes to create the Continental Navy, which later became the U.S. Navy. Then on November 10th, the greatest branch that they ever created was established, the Continental Marines, predecessor of the U.S. Marine Corps. And then July 4th, Independence Day, Congress unanimously adopted the Declaration of Independence, announcing its colony's separation from Britain. And then in September 3rd of 1783, the American and British delegation signed the Treaty of Paris, ending the Revolutionary War and recognizing the U.S. as an independent nation. 1789, Congress establishes the War Department at the cabinet level to oversee the operation and maintenance of the Army, Navy, and Marine Corps. Yeah, because at the time there was no Air Force yet. August 4th of 1790, Congress established the Revenue Cutter Service, predecessor of today's Coast Guard. Oh, yeah, that's right. And now it's it falls under DHS, interestingly enough. April 30th of 1798, the War Department transfers oversight of the Navy to the newly established Navy Department. 1800s, March 16th, 1802, President Thomas Jefferson signed the Military Peace Establishment Act into law, creating the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, New York. Okay, in 1802. So yeah, West Point's been around for a long time. The United States declares war on June 18th of 1812, what came to be known as the War of 1812, on Great Britain in response to British naval blockades and the forced conscription of American sailors into the Royal Navy. August 24th of 1814, the War Department building is set on fire during the War of 1812. All books and records are saved, having been removed a few days earlier. Yeah, I think they burned down the White House, too, at the time. February 17th of 1815, President James Madison ratifies the Treaty of Ghent, officially ending the War of 1812. June 30th of 1834, the Marine Corps is transferred to the Department of the Navy. October 10th of 1845, the Naval School, a precursor to the U.S. Naval Academy, is established in Annapolis, Maryland. Wow. Okay, so yeah, that was let me see, when was the West Point established? 1802, and then 1802, and then 1845. Wow. So the U.S. Naval Academy, or the school that was going to be the precursor to it, wasn't even established until, looks like 43 years after West Point was established. That's interesting. I didn't realize that. Any word about the hackers that got into the DMV in Nevada? I have not heard anything, Gun Bunny. Not tracking. Luke, at yourself. What's up, man? I've been up way longer than I should have been. All right, Mr. Trench, get some rest, brother. See you next time. Let's see. May 13th of 1846, March 10th of 1848, the U.S. and Mexico go to war over a border dispute in Texas, and President James K. Polk's broader ambitions to claim Mexican territories in what are now the states of California and New Mexico. July 1st of 1850, the Naval School officially becomes known as the U.S. Naval Academy. Look at that. That's an interesting looking picture. Wow. Check those hats out. Wild. 1850. April 12th, 1861 to April 9th of 1865, the Civil War is fought between the United States and the Confederate States of America, the 11 southern states that left the Union after President Abraham Lincoln's election. After the war, the United States readmitted the former Confederate states and abolished the institution of slavery. 1879, the War Department moves into the East Wing of the new State War Navy building, now known as the Eisenhower Executive Building. I've been in that building before. It is huge. There's a gigantic fence that leads all the way around this whole thing too. And then the White House is like over here where you can see my mouse. The White House is like in here, I believe. And you can walk down the sidewalk here and there's like a sidewalk leading around the whole building. Cool. Yeah, the Eisenhower building, a lot of people don't really know about that, but that's a pretty big, there's a lot of meetings that get held in there. A lot of stuff gets done inside of the Eisenhower building. April 21st, December 10th, 1898, the United States goes to war with Spain in support of Cuban independence and in response to the sinking of the battleship USS Maine in Havana Harbor. February 4th to 1899 to July 4th of 1902, after the U.S. annexes the Philippines at the end of the Spanish-American War, Filipino revolutionaries wage an unsuccessful campaign for independence that lasts more than 3 years. Wow. Everybody's wearing like soft hats. Interesting time to be alive for sure. The 1900s. April 6th of 1917 to November 11th of 1918, the U.S. entered the war in Europe, joining the Allied powers of France, Great Britain, Russia, Japan, and Italy against the Central Powers led by Germany and Austria-Hungary. The U.S. abandons neutrality nearly after 3 years after the war began in response to German submarine attacks on American ships and attempts to disrupt diplomatic relations with the Mexican government. Yeah, it was a lot. Man, what a different time that was, man. U.S. troops entrench in France. Oh, there it is. Okay, so I was wrong. No, I was right. Okay, so yeah, the U.S. Air Force wasn't around yet, but the U.S. Army Air Corps is organized on July 2nd of 1926, which is the predecessor to the U.S. Air Force. So that was when the Air Corps was established, was 26. I didn't realize that. Early 1940s, the U.S. Army undergoes a sweeping reorganization to consolidate and optimize operating efficiencies vital to the war effort. Combat forces and logistics functions are grouped into 3 new field organizations: Army Ground Forces, Army Air Forces, and Army Service Forces. July 1941, space constraints spurred the War Department, the Secretary of War, and Congress to authorize the construction of the Pentagon. At that time, the War Department workforce in the Washington, D.C. area numbered more than 24,000 civilian and military personnel housed in 17 buildings and was expected to reach 30,000 by the beginning of 1942. September 11th, 1941, ground is broken on the Pentagon on land in Virginia, portions of which belonged to Confederate General Robert E. Lee before the war. That's pretty close to, there's a lot of stuff over there. A lot of stuff. Wow, that's crazy. They started building it. Look at that. The Pentagon's still standing. That's the weird thing. It's like been modernized over time. Yeah, the U.S. Air Force was formed after World War II, yeah. Yeah, it's crazy, man. 1941, they began to break ground for the Pentagon to build it. That's crazy. December 7th, 1941, Japan attacks Pearl Harbor and draws the United States into World War II. 2 decades after the war to end all wars, World War II quickly becomes the deadliest conflict in world history. January 15th, 1943, the Pentagon officially opens 16 months after construction began. May 8th, 1945, Germany surrenders and ending World War II in Europe. September 2nd, 1945, Japan surrenders, officially ending World War II. That happened 2 days ago, was the anniversary of that. March 12th, 1947, President Harry Truman pledges U.S. support for democracies threatened by authoritarianism and urges congressional approval of economic and military assistance to thwart communist incursions in Greece and Turkey. This policy, known as the Truman Doctrine, helped set the stage for the Cold War rivalry between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. July 26, 1947, President Harry Truman signs the National Security Act. This legislation merged the Navy and War Departments and newly independent Air Force into a single organization called the National Military Establishment, led by a civilian Secretary of Defense who also oversees the Joint Chiefs of Staff. In addition, the act creates the Central Intelligence Agency, the National Security Agency, and the National Security Resources Board. Wow, the CIA was created in 1947. Interesting. September 17th, 1947, the National Military Establishment begins operations for the direction of Secretary of Defense James V. Forrestal, who had stepped down as Secretary of the Navy to serve in the new role. September 18th, 1947, the U.S. Air Force is formally established. Okay, so 1947 is when they separated from the Army and became their own independent service branch. August 10th of 1949, the National Security Act is amended, renaming the National Military Establishment to the Department of Defense. The change rescinded the cabinet-level statuses of Army, Navy, and Air Force secretaries and made them all subordinate to the Secretary of Defense, whose authority and responsibilities increased. The amendment also established a chairman for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. You read real good. I appreciate that. I'm trying to read. According to Fox News and some White House officials, apparently going to be renaming the Department of Defense back to the Department of War. Apparently, President Trump's going to pass an executive order, sign an executive order doing that tomorrow. we'll see how that goes. Though apparently it took an act of Congress the last time they changed it from the Department of War to the Department of Defense. So we'll see. Your guess is as good as mine. August 16th, 1949, Secretary of Defense Johnson swears in famed World War II Army General Omar Bradley as the first chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Interesting. I wonder if they named the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle after him or what. I don't know. June 25th, 1950, the Korean War begins with the North Korean Army's invasion of South Korea through the United Nations Security Council. President Truman marshals international opposition to the invasion, and on June 27, 1950, commits air and naval forces to the defense of South Korea. That was a brutal campaign, especially for the guys up in the north, where it's frigid. July 27, 1953, the Korean Armistice Agreement is signed, culminating in a ceasefire that is still in force. Crazy, man. April 1st, 1954, the U.S. Air Force Academy is established at Colorado Springs, Colorado. Oh, okay, April 1954. Interesting. March 8th of 1965, the first U.S. combat troops arrive in South Vietnam in 1965. March 29th, 1973, the last U.S. combat troops leave Vietnam, ending the direct U.S. military involvement in the war. Operation Desert Storm, January 17th to February 28th, 1991, is carried out after it invades Kuwait, a major oil producer. December 26, 1991, with the dissolution of the Soviet Union, the Cold War officially comes to an end. The 2000s. September 11th, 2001, Trade Center gets hit. Pentagon gets hit. Jetliner crashes in an open field near the town of Shanksville in western Pennsylvania. The attacks claimed 2,977 people. October 7, 2001, U.S. forces launch Operation Iraqi Freedom after Iraq refuses to comply with the UN Security Council Resolution 1441, the last of several failed attempts short of war to prohibit Iraq from importing and stockpiling weapons of mass destruction. March 20th of 2003, U.S. forces launch Operation Iraqi Freedom after Iraq refuses to comply with the same thing. That says the same thing. It's the same thing. September 11th, 2008, the Defense Department honors those killed in the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks with the opening of the National 9/11 Pentagon Memorial. December 15th of 2011, U.S. troops in Baghdad marked the official end of the mission in Iraq, renamed Operation New Dawn from Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2010, ending nearly 9 years of war. August 8th of 2014, Operation Inherent Resolve begins. A task force comprising of U.S. military and coalition forces begins to support Iraqi security force operations against the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, also known as ISIS. December 31st, 2014, U.S. combat operations in Afghanistan end. However, U.S. forces remain in the country to participate in Operation Freedom Sentinel, a coalition mission to train, advise, and assist Afghan national defense and security forces to conduct anti-terrorism operations against the remnants of al-Qaeda. December 20th, 2019, the U.S. Space Force is officially established as a separate military department in recognition of the growing need to strengthen defense capabilities necessary to protect space-based economic and military assets. August 30th of 2021, U.S. forces withdraw from Afghanistan, airlifting more than 120,000 people to safety as the Taliban seizes control of the country. That's the end of everything they put down. Yeah, I think history is important, and it is definitely very interesting. And I guess we'll find out if they're actually going to rename the Department of Defense to the Department of War tomorrow. I'm sure it's going to be breaking news.